Good morning and welcome to Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotion with me, Pastor Amanda. Uh, I've got some mood lighting today. Came into the church and no electricity this morning, so trying some new things this morning just to get my devotion going. So nothing's going to stop me. And so we continue to look at the Gospel of Mark this morning. And even with no electricity, chapter 3 brings us some interesting things to think about this morning. And what we discover in the beginning of chapter 3 is that Jesus is in the synagogue and he encounters a man with a withered hand. And he realizes that the Pharisees are kind of on the sidelines watching him, thinking like, what's this guy gonna do? And Jesus he just bluntly approaches the Pharisees and says, why are you plotting? Is it better to do something good on the Sabbath or to save a life, or do you just let somebody die? And he then kind of reprimands them about their hard hearts. And he said, it says here, like in verse 5, he was grieved at their hardness of heart, and then he went ahead and healed the man. So again, we see Jesus healing somebody, not necessarily for that person, but trying to make a point to someone else. And I'm going to have to just sit with that one for a while. That's been interesting. I've never noticed that in Mark. And so maybe in the next few chapters, I'll come up with something wonderful for that. But that's a good one to think about. So then we find that for Mark, there's lots of people coming into the picture, wanting to be cured. And we find that it's the demons who are continually recognizing who he is. And yet the people aren't quite sure who he is yet. But definitely, in a sense, the devil's getting worried in Mark. And we have this wonderful moment where Jesus appoints 12 apostles. So we already know that he called his disciples. Now he's been doing all this teaching and growing. And now in verse 13, they're at the mountaintop and he calls disciples. And I really love this. I mean, it's the ones we know. And he turns them into apostles. So now they've gone from the learning to the doing. An apostle is someone who is sent to share the message, to be able to do healing, to do the work that Jesus is doing. And what we find is we have Simon, Peter, and we know his story throughout, kind of how he has this roller coaster relationship with Jesus. Then we have James and John. They're called the sons of thunder. I can only imagine it's because they were angry and they were fighters. And then he names a couple of others. And then by the end, he says Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. Now, what I find amazing, now the first three and the last person, we definitely know are very flawed. And we know that some of these other guys are tax collectors and not your just charismatic, outgoing, amazing people. But Jesus uses everybody, and even when their flaws are what people recognize them by, Jesus had them going out sharing the message. Even Judas, who betrayed Jesus, was still able to do the good work of the kingdom. So why can't you and I? We all can. Jesus can use even the most flawed person to do the work. And so I think we should just remember that. We a lot of times like to hold people's pasts against them, or sometimes their futures against them. And yet Jesus calls us all. And so then we have another encounter where Jesus casts out Satan, and the Pharisees are like, well, that means you must work for Satan. If you can control him, then you must work for him. And Jesus is like, how why would I work against myself? Like, that is just ridiculous. And he's like, a house divided cannot stand. And so he's like, he just kind of uses his logic back against them. And then as this particular scripture comes to an end, we find Jesus once again kind of talking about how you have to create new family within your ministry. He goes, his sisters and brothers are waiting outside his mother, and he's like, well, I'm with my sisters and brothers and everything. And so we recognize that a lot of times, following Jesus can cause relationship issues in the family, and we kind of have to have a created family. But if we think about the whole scripture, we know that his mother and his brothers continue to have a strong influence in his life. But there's a time where he does kind of have to separate from them. And I was watching this documentary called Marathon Monks. And it's about a monk who was doing all this walking so that he could hit this next level of divinity. And it was really interesting because at one point in time, his dad came there to kind of see him, but he denied seeing his family because he knew that he couldn't stay focused on what he was trying to do if his family connected with him. And I've just kind of been thinking about that. When we're on certain transformation trajectories, we kind of have to separate from the dynamics of our families for a while, not forever, but for a while, so that we can continue to transform, because otherwise our families do have a tendency to pull us back into old behaviors and old ways. But it doesn't mean that they're not still there for us and with us, as we'll see that Mary continues to support her son, even when he at times pushes her away. She's always there for him. And I think that's kind of encouraging and hopeful, knowing that sometimes we have to step away from our families, but we can come back. So that is my thoughts on chapter 3. I hope you found some encouragement, some hope, faith, and joy in that, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a beautiful day.